Hi everyone, I wanted to touch base with you real quick. I think I'm going to do a longer stream tomorrow actually and cover all the topics that I'm going to touch on a few of today. So I want you to first of all like the video, share the video, but most of all I want you to subscribe on one of the alternative platforms. Now, one of the things I want you to do is take a look at the newsletter. I just wrote a new article on it called "Attention, LeBron, don't add a bad business decision to a ruined legacy." So you can take a look at it. It is a little bit more about the game of basketball, the business of sports, and why it isn't doing quite as well as it used to. And you can comment on it. You can also, of course, subscribe to the newsletter. There should be a sign up. In fact, let me get you a sign up real quick. So I will put the sign up in the description. I also want you to subscribe to me on all of the other social media sites where I do have a presence. So those would be BitChute, Rumble, and Odyssey. And I will put links to all of those also in the description. Now, to get to the subject at hand today, you might notice that this week Parler came back, and also Rush Limbaugh passed away. So I want to give those two events a little bit more of a full treatment later. I wasn't really available when both of those things happened. Now, I want to, first of all, tell you that I've never been that big of a fan of Parler. And likewise, I've never been really a Rush Limbaugh fan, personally. It's not as if I'm going to like dance on his grave like some of his other critics have. It's just I never really got into the show. It's not really the style that got to me. Maybe it's a generational thing. So, I don't really have anything personal against him. He was an Iraq war supporter, if I'm not mistaken. So, definitely, I think that if he never regretted that, and I'm not sure, but if he never regretted that, it's not really as if I would come from the same perspective as him, and it would be difficult for me to, really be full with the same stream as him. But yeah, I think he was, from the people that I know who are fans of his, and I know that there are people who told me that they used to listen to him daily as if it was, they would make scheduled time for it. He really was a master at his craft of talk radio. Not just a master, but the pioneer of that craft. And I think you do have to admire people who create new spaces and new, endeavors in the human experience, right? So the first person to do something is usually considered one of the, they are considered a pioneer, right? Lewis and Clark getting to the West Coast, that was considered a pioneering activity. So I think you have to give him respect for that. But on a personal level, the real importance I attribute to him has more to do with the way he was treated because of his opiate addiction, which I think if you take someone who is either non-political or is politically on the left, they get a ton of sympathy. Rush Limbaugh, I remember this happening. He admitted to being addicted to opiates and was basically being blasted, and people were saying he should be thrown into prison forever, because I believe at one point he did acquire opiates illegally, which is common for people who have that addiction, and the same type of compassion that normally you would expect, because it's not as if opiate addiction is some sort of malicious activity that people do in order to, screw other people over. It's like it is a real chemical addiction. So I remember the way that the media generally related to it is it was true Schadenfreude over something that is, I don't think, appropriate to derive pleasure from. And I am happy that Limbaugh was able to recover from. And I think that that's one of the examples of things that happened that made me change. Like up until then, I didn't really like the guy. Then I started to realize, it's not really as if his political opinions affect me personally. He's not doing things that are harming me. Now, he's advocating sometimes for some policies that I oppose. There is overlapping policy where I agree with him. Things like abortion, things like the Second Amendment, I might agree with him. But on things like war and peace and drug policy, no, I don't think I could ever really stand on the same, uh, really on the same sideline as Rush Limbaugh. But it's very surprising how many people were actually major fans of his. And you have to give him credit for that. The other thing that you might remember, which was a big deal, that is a First Amendment issue, sort of a First Amendment issue, but not entirely, was when Limbaugh was fired from Monday Night Football because he made a comment to the effect that Philadelphia Eagles quarterback Donovan McNabb was not really that great, and his stardom was attached more to this desire. I think the way he phrased it was a desire by the media for a black quarterback to succeed. And I don't think it was fair to Donovan McNabb. I think McNabb was a good quarterback. I think he could have been a Super Bowl winning quarterback. He came close one time. I think he made it to a Super Bowl. That's not the point. But Limbaugh was correctly assessing a real issue with the media where, yeah, they had this desire to evaluate quarterbacks in the National Football League differently based on their race. And he was forecasting an even more extreme tendency towards this, which lasts up until today, where you have in some cases quarterbacks like Dwayne Haskins of Washington, who not only was he not a good quarterback on the field, he was also a very irresponsible teammate off the field, doing things like, I believe he was photographed going to a strip club against team rules, and was stripped of his captaincy during the whole COVID pandemic and everything, and there's a protocol. And yet the media was saying, oh, he was released because he was black, and this was racism and everything. I think that the environment that Limbaugh was commenting on at the time, which, this was when I was in high school, so it's not as if I was there to really give a significant agreement or I think I sort of agreed with him at the time, even though politically I disagreed with him on most things. It was an accurate assessment of the way the media was moving as far as how they evaluate talent. And even someone like Clay Travis was saying that, yeah, this was wrong. This was the way that the media treated this question when Limbaugh was fired. Now, all the other stuff, the controversies, things he says, it's not like I stand behind the things he says. But the First Amendment is about having people who say things that are, in many cases, provocative, and in some cases in poor taste, right? People talk about how big of a legend Howard Stern is. I used to listen to other shock jocks in the past. And that's generally the best test for whether we have a robust public conversation. If there are people who can go on the air and challenge your personal sacred cows, and even if it's a person from the right, someone like Rush Limbaugh, who, like I said, I was never really like. I've heard people who say that, oh, this is an amazing person and a true master of everything that it takes to put together a great radio show. I don't doubt that, but I'm at the same time, if you're not really a fan, like, why should I give tribute to something that I don't necessarily relate to? So I think that's my take on Rush Limbaugh. I don't know if I'm going to cover it tomorrow, but I guess condolences to the family, but again, it wasn't somebody I was terribly tied to. The other thing I wanted to talk about is Parler. And Parler came back, and I'm going to talk about this more briefly right now. Tomorrow I might delve into this a little more. Parler is back, and I've generally said that I'm not terribly impressed with Parler. And one of the reasons is that much of the functionality of Parler is less impressive than some of the other alt tech apps. So if you go on Minds or you go on Gab, you have options to in some cases I think you can now upload video to Parler, but um, there's actually a blogging platform to Minds, which is very functional. I used to use it a lot. Don't really need to anymore. There is video hosting on Minds. There's now video hosting on Gab, but it's only for premium members. I don't think Parler is really a groundbreaking social media app. And to be honest with you, what they did when they didn't secure its infrastructure in the run up to the election and then thereafter, which allowed them to be taken off of the internet after January 6th, it shows an amateurish approach from their leadership. And yes, they've replaced their leadership. They have overcome one hurdle. That is in and of itself a very, very important milestone and victory, because it means that, yes, all of these payment processors, all of these web hosting domains, right? What's the Cloudflare? I don't remember what they do, but I think they defend against DDoS interruptions, things like that. So the loss of all of that infrastructure, and yet Parler did come back just as Gab did before it, and that is an important victory. It might not be a grand victory in the scheme of things. It's a small battle, but it is a battle that has symbolic meaning at the moment, because if people if all of this was done in order to take them down, and yet they came back, and what else can they do to destroy Parler before it becomes a nakedly illegal intrusion on this business's right to exist when they're not doing anything illegal? I think that's very important. Now, I still, with everything that's happened and all of the disappointment and disillusionment, I don't take for granted anything not happening. There's no telling what Congress, what the White House, and what our national security intel agencies could do in order to infringe on the rights of average American citizens and social media platforms like Parler, right? So I think that this is still a significant victory. However, there are examples where you can say it's not quite the free speech platform that it makes itself out to be. You see here, this was a ban that happened with Gateway Pundit. You can actually see that Gateway Pundit has embraced Gab and Parler, which I think is good. I think we should, and they've actually put Facebook on the back burner, or no, never mind. But definitely, and now you can't even share them to Twitter, because I believe Gateway Pundit was banned from Twitter. This is the future here. Now Milo Yiannopoulos was actually banned temporarily from Parler, and he's been reinstated. I believe he was making a number of very provocative tweets using words that are, they're considered expletives for homosexuals. He himself is gay, and he's generally considered someone who tries to test the bounds of freedom of speech. He is a provocateur, and if he wants to get into the situation where he's testing the bounds of the freedom of speech on Parler, that's to be expected. So I don't think Parler is really a through and through free speech website. I don't think Gab is either, by the way. I think both of them have sort of their boundaries, and we are going to be seeing echo chambers in both cases. I think on Gab they're more oriented towards the Christian right, but they do tolerate some people that are not from that sector, such as, I'm actually on Gab. I'm definitely not of the same political opinion as Andrew Torba. But all these platforms, I think, serve a different purpose, and they're going to be rivals. In fact, Torba, he put up this Gab. It was hilarious, where he was making fun of Parler, right? He said, "Is this new Parler logo or the logo of a new menstrual pad company?" So, they're taking shots at each other. I'm fine with it. I don't care. The rivalry is real if they want it to be real, and I'm fine with it. But it's important, to have these alternatives because you can see what's happening now. This is from The Guardian, Australia. Facebook is gambling. Australia can't live without it. Imagine if we prove them wrong. Some commentators reckon Facebook has called Australia's bluff. They may be about to discover that Australia isn't bluffing. So, from what I understand, you cannot share Australian media on Facebook at the moment. And in some cases, you can't even share Australian government websites. And it is, I believe, because of some sort of regulatory measures that the Australian government is taking against Facebook because of various intrusive practices that Facebook has. And if this starts to become the norm, where Facebook is getting into these real disputes with national governments, I think optimally, I'd like to see people really embrace this as the chance to reject this awful website. Like I hardly use Facebook anymore. I think it will get to the point, I think, where I will delete my account. Unfortunately, there are people that I can only contact through there because they insist, because of their their habits, that they only want to use Facebook. They don't want to use any of these other alternatives, or they don't want to use maybe like a text app or something like Telegram. So I will eventually, I believe, delete the actual account, but I hardly use it right now. And the trend right now, I think, is that some of these foreign governments are going to start to say, we've been played way too long, and it's time to start playing hardball. So I think some of those countries, like you could see Australia is certainly testing it, but I think India, I think you could start seeing potentially Saudi Arabia, for whatever reason. You could see countries like, I believe Russia already has restrictions on it, and you could see Eastern Europe. Poland is a notable example. So really, I would hope that we can use the events of this week, whether it is the return of Parler, which I think is a good story. It's not a perfect story. I'm not endorsing Parler. I use it because there are people that I want to reach there, but I'm not necessarily a fan, right? So that is a good step forward. The death of Rush Limbaugh is certainly something you can at least take from it some of these important lessons about how media works and how the media can twist the legacy of a person. They even, Time Magazine, imagine this, they had an op-ed to eulogize him by Joe Walsh, who was basically a Rush Limbaugh imitator and hater at the end of his life. Like Joe Walsh turned completely against conservatism, and Time Magazine decided to publish, with Limbaugh's death, this article, which is basically talking about how awful of an effect Rush Limbaugh had on the public conversation. Well, it's the same type of thing that that Joe Walsh was doing. Joe Walsh was saying things, I remember, that were blatantly inflammatory, and he was also, and by the way, Joe Walsh was elected to Congress and was a total failure at both being a member of Congress and also eventually at being a talk radio host and everything. So, but that's the guy that Time Magazine selected to write the article because he is a turncoat conservative who ran against Donald Trump in 2020 as a never Trumper, had just a complete failure of a campaign. And that's who Time Magazine decides to have as a person to profile Rush Limbaugh. So all of those examples are things where we have to start really embracing this idea that we don't have to really be the same person, have the same opinions, share the same mind, because that's not what makes a healthy society. Having people of identical mindsets and perspectives, right? I don't have the same perspective as my brother or sister or my wife or my parents, and I think that's fine. I think I'm personally fine with people living in separate states of mind, because that way they can each build on the feedback that they give each other, and that makes for a real healthy exchange, instead of people just validating everything that comes out of each other's mouths. And that's why I think, yes, I wasn't a fan of Rush Limbaugh, right? I actually didn't like him when I was a kid because he was considered a joke. In fact, I actually liked Al Franken. And what would you know? I've grown up. I probably would have had a better interaction with Rush Limbaugh. I agreed with him on more topics than Al Franken, and certainly I don't respect Al Franken as a person. But I think both of them are, they should be free to share their ideas in this society, even if they're wrong about some of them. And even if I'm wrong about something, I should be allowed to say the same thing. And that's not what big tech is allowing. So I want you to, again, like I said at the beginning, I want you to sign up for the newsletter. So that's over here. And I want you to come find me on BitChute, right? You can find me at Chef Leopard. I really love using BitChute lately. It's been performing great. You can also find me on Rumble, also at Chef Leopard, and you can find me on Odyssey at Razor Ray McCoy, at Bold Like a Leopard. You can either do this channel, Razor Ray McCoy, or Bold Like a Leopard. And have a great day, and I hope to talk to you soon. Probably doing a live stream tomorrow. Take care.